Every parent's worst nightmare is watching their child suffer in silence. When 10-year-old Maya's world becomes unbearable, she makes a desperate choice. Maya has endured months of cruel bullying at her new school, finding comfort only in her loyal dog, Baxter. The taunting grows worse each day. One afternoon, instead of going home, Maya runs to the park where she's noticed a quiet maintenance worker eating lunch alone. She doesn't know this man is Jack Brenner, a former FBI agent whose life fell apart after a tragic mission. When Maya approaches this stranger and asks for help, something awakens in Jack's broken heart. But what happens when a man who's lost everything meets a child who needs everything? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning alarm pierced through Maya's restless sleep like a shard of glass. Her stomach clenched immediately, a Pavlovian response to the sound that meant another day of torture awaited. She pulled her blanket over her head, breathing in the familiar scent of lavender fabric softener that her mother used, a small comfort in a world that had become increasingly hostile. "Maya, honey, you need to get moving or you'll be late," Sarah called from the hallway, her voice already strained with the weight of another hurried morning. Maya could hear her mother's footsteps, quick and purposeful, the sound of someone perpetually running behind schedule. Baxter, her golden retriever mix, lifted his head from where he slept beside her bed. His warm brown eyes studied her face with the kind of understanding that only dogs seem to possess. He didn't know about the notes stuffed in her locker calling her weirdo and freak. He didn't know about the laughter that followed her down the hallways like a malicious echo. All Baxter knew was that his girl was hurting, and he pressed his cold nose against her hand in silent solidarity. Maya sat up slowly, her legs feeling heavy as lead. The torn strap of her backpack hung from the chair where she'd left it the night before, frayed threads serving as a constant reminder of yesterday's humiliation. During lunch, Tyler Morrison had yanked it so hard while she wasn't looking that the strap had given way, sending her books and papers scattering across the cafeteria floor. The laughter had been immediate and merciless. "Just ignore them," she whispered to herself, repeating the advice every adult had given her. "They'll get bored and move on." But 3 months into the school year, they showed no signs of losing interest. If anything, her reactions seemed to fuel their creativity in finding new ways to torment her. Sarah appeared in the doorway, already dressed in her nursing scrubs, her hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. Dark circles under her eyes spoke of another late shift at the hospital, followed by too little sleep. She'd taken the job 6 months ago when they'd moved to Millbrook, a small town an hour outside the city where rent was cheaper and life was supposed to be simpler. "You feeling okay, sweetheart?" Sarah's voice carried that particular note of concern that made Maya's chest tighten. Her mother worried enough already without adding school troubles to her burden. "Just tired," Maya said, forcing what she hoped was a convincing smile. "Baxter kept me up. I think he was dreaming about squirrels again." Sarah's expression softened as she looked at the dog, who wagged his tail innocently. "Well, make sure you both get some rest tonight. I'll be working late again, but Mrs. Henderson next door said she'd check on you." Maya nodded, already dreading the long evening ahead. Mrs. Henderson was kind, but had a hearing problem that meant she spent most of her visits with the television volume turned up loud enough to rattle the windows. It would be another night of Maya and Baxter huddled together, waiting for morning. After her mother left, Maya moved through her morning routine like a sleepwalker. The face in the bathroom mirror looked pale and hollow-eyed, nothing like the confident girl she'd been before the move. Before Tyler Morrison and his friends had decided she was an easy target. Before she'd learned that being the new kid meant wearing an invisible sign that said, "Pick on me." The walk to school took 15 minutes, a journey that had become a daily exercise in hypervigilance. Maya kept her head down, watching the sidewalk crack past beneath her feet, while her ears strained for the sound of approaching footsteps or the rumble of Tyler's older brother's truck. Baxter walked beside her as far as the school property line, where dogs weren't allowed. Each morning, she had to leave him tied to the fence post, his worried whine following her as she walked toward the building. "I'll be back," she promised him every day, though lately she wasn't sure she believed it herself. Inside Lincoln Elementary, the hallways buzzed with the energy of children who felt safe in their environment. Maya envied them their easy laughter, their casual friendships, their ability to move through the world without constantly looking over their shoulders. She'd once been like that, back in the city where she'd had friends who knew her since kindergarten and teachers who understood her quiet nature. Her first class was math with Mrs. Patterson, a stern woman who believed in order and discipline. Maya actually enjoyed the predictability of numbers, the way equations had clear answers that couldn't be twisted or misinterpreted. She was good at math, which only seemed to irritate Tyler more. "Hey, calculator girl," he whispered as she walked past his desk. Just loud enough for his friends to hear, but quiet enough to avoid Mrs. Patterson's attention. "Bet you can't solve this problem. How to make friends." His friends snickered and Maya felt her cheeks burn. She kept walking, sliding into her seat in the second row and pulling out her textbook with hands that trembled slightly. The worst part wasn't the name-calling or even the physical pranks. The worst part was how alone it made her feel, how it seemed to confirm every fear she'd had about starting over in a new place. During recess, Maya found her usual spot on the far end of the playground, where she could see Baxter waiting by the fence. The other children ran and played, their voices carrying on the autumn wind, while Maya sat on a bench with a book she wasn't really reading. She'd learned that looking busy discouraged most interactions, both welcome and unwelcome. From her quiet corner, she could see across the street to Millbrook Park, a small green space with old oak trees and a pond where ducks gathered. Sometimes she watched the maintenance worker who ate his lunch there every day, sitting alone on a bench near the water. He was older, probably around her father's age would have been if he'd lived, with greying hair and clothes that had seen better days. There was something peaceful about the way he fed breadcrumbs to the ducks, something that made her think he understood what it was like to prefer solitude to the complications of human interaction. Jack Brenner sat on his usual bench, unwrapping a sandwich he'd made that morning with the methodical precision of someone who'd learned to find comfort in routine. The turkey was sliced evenly, the lettuce crisp, the mustard applied with careful attention to coverage. These details mattered when you had nothing else to look forward to. He'd been working maintenance for the Millbrook Parks Department for 8 months now, a job that suited his need for anonymity and physical activity. The work was simple, mowing grass, cleaning restrooms, picking up litter, but it kept his hands busy and his mind occupied. Most days, he could almost forget who he used to be. The FBI badge buried beneath the tools in his maintenance cart served as both a reminder and a weight. Special Agent Jack Brenner had been someone who mattered, someone who protected people and made a difference. Jack the maintenance worker was nobody special, just another middle-aged man who'd given up on ambition and settled for survival. The ducks knew his schedule better than any human in his life. They gathered expectantly as he pulled apart pieces of bread, their soft quacking the closest thing to conversation he experienced most days. He'd tried the social aspects of his new life, the diner where other workers gathered for coffee, the bar where men his age commiserated about jobs and ex-wives, but small talk felt like wearing clothes that didn't fit. Everything reminded him of what he'd lost. Across the street, Lincoln Elementary was releasing children for lunch recess. Jack had noticed the patterns over the months, the groups that formed and reformed, the natural hierarchies that emerged even among children, the ones who stood alone. One girl in particular had caught his attention, small for her age, with dark hair that she often hid behind, usually carrying a book like a shield. She reminded him of his sister at that age, back when the world still held possibilities instead of threats. The girl sat on the same bench every day, occasionally glancing toward the fence where a golden dog waited with infinite patience. Jack had pieced together their routine, the morning walk to school, The reluctant goodbye, the reunion at day's end. The dog's devotion was absolute, the kind of loyalty Jack had once inspired in his team members before everything went wrong. He'd been watching the girl for weeks now, not in any inappropriate way, but with the observational skills that had once made him valuable to the Bureau. Something was wrong in her world. The way she held herself, the careful scanning of her surroundings, the flinch when other children approached, these were behaviors he recognized from victims in his old cases. Someone was hurting this child, and every protective instinct he'd thought buried was stirring to life. Maya's afternoon classes passed in a blur of careful invisibility. She'd mastered the art of being present without drawing attention, participating just enough to avoid teacher concern, but not enough to invite peer resentment. By the final bell, her shoulders ached from tension and her stomach cramped from the stress of constant vigilance. The reunion with Baxter was the day's only bright spot. His tail wagged so hard his entire body wiggled, and he pressed against her legs as if to reassure himself she was really safe. Maya buried her face in his fur, breathing in his familiar scent and letting his presence chase away some of the day's accumulated misery. "Come on, boy," she whispered. "Let's go home." But home felt like another kind of prison lately, a place where she had to pretend everything was fine, where she couldn't burden her already overwhelmed mother with problems that felt insurmountable. As they walked past the park, Maya found herself glancing toward the bench where the maintenance worker sat. He was gathering up his lunch trash with the same careful attention she'd noticed before, and for a moment their eyes met across the distance. He nodded slightly, the kind of acknowledgement one might give to a regular neighbor. Maya felt something unexpected, not fear, but a strange sense of recognition, as if this stranger somehow understood the weight she carried. She looked away quickly, but the feeling lingered as she and Baxter continued toward home. In her small bedroom that evening, with Baxter curled beside her and the distant sound of Mrs. Henderson's television humming through the walls, Maya stared at the ceiling and wondered how much longer she could keep pretending. The torn backpack strap lay on her desk, like evidence of a crime no one wanted to acknowledge. Tomorrow would bring another day of careful navigation, another test of her ability to disappear in plain sight, but somewhere in the back of her mind, she kept thinking about the quiet man in the park, about the gentle way he fed the ducks, and the understanding in his eyes. Maybe, she thought as sleep finally claimed her, not all strangers were dangerous. Maybe some of them knew what it was like to feel invisible too. Jack finished his evening routine, dinner for one, the evening news with its parade of human misery. A chapter from whatever paperback he'd picked up at the library. But tonight, his thoughts kept returning to the girl with the golden dog. Tomorrow, he decided, he might take his lunch a few minutes earlier, perhaps find a bench closer to the school. He told himself it was simple human decency, the kind of community awareness any responsible adult should demonstrate. But deep in his chest, something that had been dormant for 2 years was beginning to stir. Something that remembered what it felt like to protect the innocent, to stand between predators and their prey. Something that whispered that maybe his useful days weren't entirely behind him. The FBI badge in his toolbox seemed to weigh a little less as he locked the cart in the maintenance shed and headed home to his empty apartment. The morning started like any other, but sometimes the universe has a way of deciding that a person has endured enough. Maya should have recognized the signs, the way Tyler Morrison's eyes glittered with anticipation during math class, the hushed conversations that stopped when she walked by, the feeling of electricity in the air that preceded a storm. It started at lunch, in the cafeteria, where the smell of institutional food mixed with the chaos of 200 children eating and talking at once. Maya had found a corner table as usual and was working on homework while picking at her sandwich. The noise provided a kind of camouflage, making her invisible among the more social children who laughed and shared stories at tables, who crowded with friends. She didn't see Tyler approaching until his shadow fell across her notebook. "Look, what we have here," Tyler said, loud enough to attract attention from nearby tables. It's Maya the weirdo, eating lunch all by herself, again. Maya kept her eyes on her homework, her pencil moving across the page, though she could no longer concentrate on the problems. The familiar knot formed in her stomach, the one that had become as much a part of her lunch routine as her apple juice. "I'm talking to you," Tyler said, his voice taking on the edge that meant trouble was coming. "Leave me alone," Maya whispered. Still not looking up. "What did you say?" Tyler cupped his ear in exaggerated fashion. "I couldn't hear you. Can you speak up for the class, Maya?" A few children at neighboring tables had turned to watch now, sensing entertainment. Maya felt their eyes like spotlights, each gaze making her smaller and more exposed. Her hand tightened around her pencil. "I said, leave me alone." This time her voice was slightly louder, but it carried a tremor that betrayed her fear. Tyler laughed, and his friends, Jason Miller and Craig Foster, appeared beside him like hyenas drawn to a wounded animal. "Oh, she's got an attitude today. Maybe we should help her learn some manners." Before Maya could react, Tyler grabbed her milk carton and squeezed hard, sending chocolate milk spraying across her homework and lap. The liquid soaked through her jeans and splattered her notebook, turning her careful handwriting into brown smears. "Oops," Tyler said with mock concern. "Looks like you're all wet, Maya. Maybe you should go clean yourself up." Maya stood up quickly, her chair scraping against the floor, but her movements knocked over her remaining lunch. The apple rolled across the floor, while her sandwich landed face down near Tyler's feet. The watching children giggled and pointed, and Maya felt her cheeks burn with humiliation. "Look at the mess she made," Jason said. "What a klutz." Maya bent to gather her things, but Craig kicked her backpack away from her reach. The one with the torn strap that she'd carefully reinforced with safety pins that morning. The bag skidded across the floor, and more children began to watch the spectacle. "Give it back," Maya said, her voice stronger now, fueled by desperation rather than courage. "What? This old thing?" Craig picked up the backpack and dangled it just out of her reach. "It's falling apart. Maybe we're doing you a favor by throwing it away." He tossed the backpack to Tyler, who caught it and immediately threw it to Jason. Maya found herself in the middle of a cruel game of keep-away, lunging for her belongings, while the boys laughed and more children gathered to watch. Her wet clothes clung to her uncomfortably, and she could feel chocolate milk drying sticky on her skin. "Stop it," she said, her voice rising. "Just stop it!" That's when it happened. Tyler, emboldened by the audience and perhaps not judging the distance correctly, threw the backpack harder than intended. It struck Maya in the face, the corner of a textbook inside, connecting with her cheekbone, with enough force to bring tears to her eyes and send her stumbling backward. The cafeteria went suddenly quiet. Even Tyler looked surprised by what had happened. Maya touched her cheek and felt it swelling, the skin tender and hot beneath her fingers. For a moment nobody moved. Then a lunch aide appeared, alerted by the sudden silence. "What's going on here?" "Maya fell down," Tyler said quickly. "She's really clumsy." "Yeah," Craig added. "She spilled her milk everywhere and then tripped over her own backpack." The aide looked at Maya with the tired expression of someone who dealt with playground drama daily. "Are you hurt, honey?" Maya looked around at the faces watching her, some curious, some amused, some uncomfortable but unwilling to contradict the popular boys. She realized that even if she told the truth, it would be her word against 3 of theirs. And tomorrow, if they were punished, the retaliation would be worse. "I'm fine," she whispered, picking up her damaged backpack. "I just fell." The aide helped her clean up the spilled milk and suggested she visit the nurse for her cheek, but Maya just wanted to escape. She spent the rest of lunch in the bathroom, looking at her reflection in the mirror and trying to figure out how to explain the bruise to her mother. When the school called that afternoon to request a conference about Maya's adjustment issues, Sarah was in the middle of administering medication to a patient in the cardiac unit. By the time she could return the call, the school day was over and the office staff had gone home. She left a voicemail promising to call back in the morning, unaware that her daughter had just endured the worst day of her young life. Maya walked home in a daze, Baxter pressing close to her side as if sensing her distress. The bruise on her cheek throbbed with each step, and her clothes still smelled like chocolate milk, despite her attempts to clean them in the school bathroom. She'd never felt more alone in her life. Instead of going straight home to the empty house, where she'd have to pretend everything was fine when her mother called during her break, Maya found herself walking toward the park. She didn't have a plan, didn't really know what she was hoping for. She just knew she couldn't face the silence of her bedroom, the weight of keeping another secret, the growing certainty that things would never get better. Jack was finishing his lunch when he saw the girl approaching. Even from a distance, he could tell something was wrong. Her usual cautious walk had become a stumble, and the dog beside her was acting more protective than usual, staying closer to her legs and looking around alertly. As she got closer, Jack could see the bruise blooming on her left cheek, dark against her pale skin. His hands tightened around the remains of his sandwich. He'd seen enough injured children in his career to recognize the signs of someone who'd been hurt and was trying to hide it. Maya stopped about 10 feet away from his bench, suddenly uncertain. What was she doing? Her mother had taught her never to talk to strangers, especially adult men she didn't know. But there was something about this man's stillness, the gentle way he sat with the ducks gathering at his feet, that felt safe rather than threatening. "Excuse me," she said, her voice barely audible over the sound of wind in the oak trees. Jack looked up from his lunch, careful to keep his expression neutral and non-threatening. "Hello there. Maya started, then stopped. How could she explain? How could she tell a stranger that her world was falling apart and she didn't know where else to turn? "Are you okay?" Jack asked gently, noting the bruise and the way she held herself like someone expecting another blow. The simple question, asked with genuine concern by someone who didn't know her story or her mother's struggles, broke something loose inside Maya. Tears she'd been holding back all day began to flow. "No," she whispered. "I'm not okay." Jack set his lunch aside and turned slightly on the bench, giving her his full attention while being careful not to appear threatening. "What happened to your face?" "Some boys at school," Maya said, touching her cheek unconsciously. "They were just playing around, but playing around doesn't usually leave bruises," Jack said quietly. His voice held no judgment, just a calm certainty that made Maya feel like someone finally understood. "They hate me," the words tumbled out before she could stop them. "Every day it gets worse, and I don't know what to do. My mom is working all the time, and she's already stressed, and I can't—" Maya's voice broke, and she couldn't continue. Jack felt something stir in his chest, a familiar anger at those who preyed on the vulnerable. But more than that, he felt the old protective instinct that had driven him to join law enforcement in the first place. This child needed help, and he was perhaps the only person in a position to provide it. "What's your name?" he asked. "Maya," she said, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "And this is Baxter." "I'm Jack," he said. "And Maya, I want you to know that what's happening to you isn't okay. You don't deserve to be hurt, and you don't have to handle this alone." Maya looked up at him with eyes that held far too much pain for someone her age. "But what can I do? Adults always say to ignore bullies, but ignoring them just makes them try harder." Jack nodded, recognizing the truth in her words. "Sometimes ignoring bullies works, sometimes it doesn't. And sometimes you need help from someone who knows how to handle people who hurt others." "Are you a teacher?" Maya asked. Jack hesitated. He could lie, keep his cover intact, maintain the safe anonymity he'd built. But looking at this injured child, he realized that his need for safety was less important than her need for protection. "I used to be someone who helped kids like you," he said carefully. "Someone who knew how to deal with bullies and make them stop. Like a policeman." "Something like that." Maya studied his face, searching for something she couldn't name. "Would you help me?" The question hung in the air between them, heavy with implications. Jack thought about his quiet life, his careful routine, his determination to stay uninvolved. Then he looked at the bruise on Maya's cheek and the trust in her eyes. "Yes," he said, "I'll help you." For the first time in months, Maya felt something she'd almost forgotten: hope. It was fragile and uncertain, but it was there. And beside her, Baxter wagged his tail as if he approved of this new alliance. "Thank you," Maya whispered. Jack nodded, already beginning to formulate a plan. It had been 2 years since he'd felt the clarity of purpose that came with protecting someone who needed protection. It felt like coming back to life. The next morning, Jack arrived at work 30 minutes early and positioned himself where he could observe the school drop-off routine. He'd spent the night thinking about Maya's bruised face and the defeated way she'd held herself. Memories of old cases filtering through his mind like unwelcome ghosts. Child victims had always affected him more than adult ones. Their innocence, their trust, their belief that adults would protect them when they asked for help. From his vantage point near the maintenance shed, Jack watched the familiar patterns unfold. Parents hurrying to drop off children before racing to work, teenagers walking in groups that shifted and reformed like flocks of birds, younger children clinging to backpacks and lunchboxes like lifelines. And there was Maya, walking slowly with Baxter at her side, her movements careful and deliberate as she scanned the area for threats. Jack noted the way she tied Baxter to the fence post, how she lingered there as long as possible before entering the building. He also noted the group of 3 boys who arrived in an older model pickup truck, laughing loudly and shoving each other in the performative way of young males establishing dominance. Tyler Morrison, if Jack's memory of local families served him correctly. The truck belonged to an older brother with a reputation for minor trouble. When Maya appeared for lunch recess, she made her way directly to the fence where Baxter waited. But instead of sitting on her usual bench, she walked across the street to the park. Jack had anticipated this and was waiting on a different bench, one that offered a clear view of both the school and the street. "Hi, Jack," Maya said quietly, settling beside him with Baxter lying down at her feet. "Hello." "Maya, how was your morning?" She touched her cheek unconsciously. The bruise had darkened overnight, purple and yellow against her pale skin. "Okay, I guess. They left me alone." Jack nodded, understanding that okay in Maya's world meant survivable. "Tell me about these boys who've been bothering you." Maya glanced around nervously, as if the bullies might materialize from behind the oak trees. "Tyler Morrison is the worst one. He's in 6th grade, but he's bigger than most kids because he got held back. His friends are Jason Miller and Craig Foster. They're not as mean when Tyler's not around, but they follow his lead. What kind of things do they do?" Maya's voice dropped to almost a whisper. "They call me names. They hide my things or mess them up. Yesterday was the first time one of them actually hit me, even if it was with my backpack." She paused, then added, "Tyler says I'm weird because I don't have any friends. He says my mom's a loser because we live in the cheapest apartment in town." Jack felt his jaw tighten. Adult bullies were one thing. They could be reasoned with, arrested, or otherwise neutralized. Child bullies were more complicated, protected by their age, and the assumption that their behavior was just part of growing up. But Jack had dealt with enough criminal psychology to recognize the patterns that often started in childhood. "Maya, I want to teach you some things that might help," Jack said. "Not fighting. I don't want you to get physical with anyone unless you're in real danger. But there are ways to carry yourself, ways to speak, that can make bullies less likely to target you." Maya looked up at him with hope flickering in her eyes. "Really? Really?" "First lesson, posture," Jack demonstrated, straightening his shoulders and lifting his chin slightly. "When you walk, imagine there's a string pulling you up from the top of your head. Make eye contact when you can do it safely. Bullies prefer targets who look defeated." Maya tried to mimic his posture, and Jack could see the difference immediately. "Like this?" "Exactly like that. Practice it when you're walking with Baxter. He'll help. Dogs make people look less vulnerable." Jack pulled out an old military photo from his wallet, one that showed him in dress uniform with his squad. "This is from a long time ago, but I learned some things about confidence back then." Maya studied the photo with wide eyes. "You were in the army?" "Something like that." Jack tucked the photo away. "The point is, confidence isn't about being the biggest or the strongest. It's about believing you have a right to take up space in the world." They spent the rest of lunch break practicing what Jack privately thought of as command presence, the subtle signals that separated potential victims from people who weren't worth the trouble. Maya was a quick learner, and more importantly, she seemed to grow taller with each lesson. Tomorrow, if Tyler says something to you, try looking him in the eye and saying, "Stop," in a clear, firm voice, Jack suggested. Not angry, not scared, just matter of fact. Like you're telling him the sky is blue. What if he doesn't stop? Then you walk away with your head up, and we'll talk about next steps. Maya nodded solemnly, and Jack felt a familiar weight settling on his shoulders, the weight of someone else's safety depending on his judgment. He'd forgotten how heavy it could be. That afternoon, as Maya walked home with Baxter, Sarah noticed something different about her daughter's gait. The girl was walking straighter, her head held higher. When Maya came through the door, Sarah looked up from the medical journal she was reading during her brief break between shifts. "How was school today, honey?" "It was okay," Maya said, and for the first time in months, Sarah sensed she might actually mean it. "Your cheek looks better," Sarah observed, noting that the bruise was already beginning to fade. "The nurse gave me some ice yesterday," Maya said, which was technically true, even though she'd gotten the ice herself from the cafeteria. Sarah studied her daughter's face, looking for signs of trouble, but Maya seemed more animated than she'd been in weeks. "Did you make any new friends?" Maya hesitated. How could she explain about Jack without worrying her mother? "Sort of. There's this man who feeds the ducks in the park. He's really nice." Every maternal alarm bell Sarah possessed began ringing at once. "What kind of man?" "He's old, like maybe 50, Maya said quickly. "He works for the park service, and he just sits there at lunch and feeds the ducks." "We talked about school stuff." Sarah felt her chest tighten. "Maya, honey, you know you're not supposed to talk to strangers, especially adult men." "He's not strange," Maya protested. "He's nice, and Baxter likes him." Sarah looked at her daughter's earnest face and felt torn between protective instinct and the knowledge that Maya had been struggling. "I don't want you talking to this man anymore unless I meet him first, okay?" Maya's face fell. "Mom, no arguments. I know you think he's nice, but I don't know anything about him. Promise me you'll stay away from him until I can check him out." Maya nodded reluctantly, but Sarah could see the disappointment in her eyes. Still, when it came to her daughter's safety, Sarah would rather err on the side of caution. The next day at school, Maya tried to put Jack's lessons into practice. When Tyler approached her at lunch, she straightened her spine and looked directly at him. "Well, well," Tyler said. "Look who thinks she's tough today." "Leave me alone, Tyler," Maya said, her voice steady and clear. Tyler seemed surprised by her tone. For a moment he hesitated, and Maya felt a flicker of hope. Then his friends appeared beside him and his bravado returned. "Oh, listen to that," Jason said. "Maya's got an attitude." "Maybe she needs an attitude adjustment," Craig added. But Tyler was studying Maya's face, looking for the fear that had always been there before. When he didn't find it, he seemed unsure how to proceed. Instead of escalating, he settled for a dismissive laugh. "Whatever. Come on, guys. Let's go find something actually fun to do." They walked away, leaving Maya standing alone but upright. It wasn't a complete victory, but it wasn't a defeat either. For the first time in months, she'd held her ground. Jack watched from across the street, pride and concern warring in his chest. Maya had done well, but he could see Tyler's confusion would likely turn to anger once he'd had time to think about it. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. More troubling was the growing sense of responsibility Jack felt toward this child. He'd promised himself he wouldn't get involved, wouldn't care about anyone enough to risk the kind of pain he'd experienced when his last case went wrong. But as he watched Maya walk with more confidence toward the fence where Baxter waited, Jack realized it was already too late. He was involved. He did care, and that meant he had to be very careful about what came next. Despite her mother's warning, Maya found herself drawn back to the park the next day. She told herself it was just to thank Jack for his advice, that she wouldn't stay long. But when she saw him sitting on their usual bench with a small gift bag beside him, her steps quickened. "I thought you might not come back," Jack said as she approached. "My mom doesn't want me talking to strangers," Maya admitted, settling beside him while Baxter investigated the interesting smells around the bench. "Your mom is smart," Jack said. "She's protecting you the only way she knows how." But I understand why that puts you in a difficult position. Maya nodded, relieved that he didn't seem angry about her mother's restrictions. I wanted to tell you that your advice worked. Sort of, only sort of. Tyler left me alone yesterday, but today he seemed madder. Like he was upset that I didn't act scared. Maya pulled her knees up to her chest. He knocked my books down when I was at my locker, but he did it when Mrs. Patterson was looking. So when she asked what happened, he said I dropped them, and he was just helping me pick them up. Jack recognized the pattern. Escalation masked as helpfulness, ensuring adult witnesses would see only the aftermath, not the aggression. That's actually progress, even though it doesn't feel like it. He's having to work harder to bother you, which means your confidence is having an effect. It doesn't feel like progress. The best kind of victory often doesn't. At first, Jack gestured toward the gift bag. I brought you something. Consider it a tool for your confidence toolkit. Maya looked at the bag uncertainly. My mom says I shouldn't accept gifts from strangers. Your mom is right again, but maybe you could take it and show it to her first. If she says you can't keep it, I'll understand. Maya opened the bag and pulled out a bright blue collar with reflective trim and a small whistle attached. For Baxter? The whistle is loud enough to attract attention if you're ever in real trouble. And Baxter will look more official with a proper collar, like he's a trained protection dog rather than just a pet. Maya held the collar up, and Baxter wagged his tail as if he understood he was getting a present. Thank you, Jack. This is really nice. There's something else in there. Maya reached deeper into the bag and found a small notebook with a pen attached. What's this for? Documentation. If Tyler or his friends do something to you, write it down. Date, time, what happened, who saw it. Details matter when adults finally decide to pay attention. Maya flipped through the empty pages, understanding beginning to dawn. You really do know about this stuff, don't you? About bullies and making them stop. Jack was quiet for a moment, watching the ducks paddle across the pond. I used to help people who were being hurt by other people. Children, mostly. It was my job to understand how predators think, how they choose their victims, how to protect the innocent. What happened? Why don't you do it anymore? The question cut deeper than Maya could know. Jack had spent 2 years avoiding this exact conversation, but something about her earnest curiosity made him want to try explaining. Sometimes, even when you know all the right things to do, you can't save everyone. I made a mistake and a child got hurt because of it. After that, I decided it was safer for everyone if I found a different kind of work. Maya studied his profile, noting the sadness that seemed to live in the lines around his eyes. But you're helping me. That's different. How? Jack couldn't answer that question, even to himself. All he knew was that walking away from Maya felt impossible in a way that walking away from his career hadn't. Over the following days, their lunch meetings became a routine that gave structure to both their lives. Maya would appear at the park each day with updates on her situation, and Jack would offer advice, techniques, or simply a listening ear. Gradually, Maya began sharing more than just school troubles. My dad died when I was 7, she told him one afternoon while Baxter chased ducks along the pond's edge. Car accident. Mom says that's why we had to move here. She couldn't afford our old apartment anymore. That must have been hard. I don't remember him very well anymore, which makes me feel guilty. But I remember he used to take me and Baxter to the park on Sundays. We'd bring a picnic and stay all day. Maya picked at the grass beside the bench. Mom works all the time now. Double shifts at the hospital. She's always tired and stressed, and I don't want to make it worse by telling her about Tyler. Jack understood the weight of that responsibility. A 10-year-old protecting her parent from additional pain. Your mom loves you. She'd want to know if you were being hurt. She'd worry, and then she'd try to fix it. And then she'd feel bad when she couldn't. It's easier to just handle it myself, except you can't handle it yourself. That's why you asked me for help. Maya was quiet for a moment. Do you think I'm a coward for not standing up to them better? I think you're one of the bravest people I've ever met, Jack said, with complete sincerity. It takes courage to ask for help. It takes courage to keep going to school every day when you know you'll be hurt. And it takes courage to protect your mother from worry, even when you're scared. That afternoon, Maya tried Jack's latest suggestion, responding to Tyler's taunts with questions instead of fear. When Tyler called her a weirdo, she looked at him calmly and asked, "Why do you think that?" When he said her mom was a loser, she asked, "What makes you say that?" The technique worked for exactly one day. Tyler seemed confused by her responses and backed down. But the next morning he arrived at school with a new strategy. "I heard your mom is a janitor at the hospital," he announced loudly in the hallway before first period. "That's why you're so poor you have to shop at thrift stores." Maya felt her cheeks burn. "She's a nurse." "Sure she is. That's why you live in that crappy apartment complex with all the drug dealers." Jason and Craig laughed, and other children stopped to listen. Maya felt the familiar helplessness rising in her throat, but this time it was mixed with anger. Tyler was attacking her mother, who worked 16-hour days to keep them afloat. "My mom saves people's lives," Maya said, her voice rising. "What does your family do besides bully little kids?" The hallway went quiet. Tyler's face flushed red, and Maya realized she'd crossed a line she couldn't uncross. "You're gonna pay for that," Tyler whispered. And she did. Throughout the day, Tyler's retaliation was swift and creative. Her locker was vandalized with cruel words written in permanent marker. Her lunch was knocked to the floor in front of everyone. During recess, someone, though she couldn't prove it was Tyler, threw a mud ball that hit her in the back, leaving a stain on her shirt that she couldn't explain away. When Maya appeared at the park that afternoon, Jack could see immediately that something had gone wrong. Her earlier confidence had evaporated, replaced by a defeat that seemed deeper than before. "It got worse," she said simply, settling beside him with Baxter, pressing close to her legs. Jack listened as she recounted the day's events, his concern growing with each detail. Tyler was escalating because Maya had challenged him publicly. The boy was asserting dominance, and the next phase would likely involve more than just verbal taunts and minor pranks. "Maya, I think it's time to involve adults at the school. I told you they won't believe me. And even if they do, Tyler will just be more careful about how he hurts me." Jack knew she was probably right, but his protective instincts were screaming warnings. "What if I talk to your mother? Explain the situation?" Maya's eyes widened with panic. "No!" She'd freak out and try to homeschool me or something. "We can't afford for her to miss work dealing with school meetings. Then what do you want to do?" Maya was quiet for a long moment, staring at the ducks on the pond. "I want them to leave me alone. I want to go to school without being afraid. I want my mom to not have to worry about anything else." She looked up at Jack with eyes that held too much sadness for someone her age. "I want someone to make them stop." Jack felt something shift inside his chest, a familiar sensation he recognized as the moment when a case became personal. He'd sworn he wouldn't let that happen again, wouldn't let himself care enough to risk making dangerous mistakes. But looking at Maya's bruised spirit and desperate hope, he realized the decision had already been made. "I'll make them stop," he said quietly. "How?" Jack didn't answer immediately. His mind was already working through possibilities, considering approaches, calculating risks. He was thinking like an agent again, and that both thrilled and terrified him. "Let me worry about how," he said finally. "You just keep doing what you're doing, documenting everything, staying strong, taking care of yourself and Baxter." Maya nodded, and for the first time in days, she smiled. It was a small smile, but it contained hope, and that was enough for now. As they walked back toward the school to collect Baxter and head home, Jack was already planning. He would need to be careful, strategic, and completely off the record. Sarah didn't know him, the school didn't know his background, and Tyler's family had no idea what they were dealing with, but Maya knew she wasn't alone anymore. And that was the first step toward justice. Jack's investigation began the way all good investigations did, with careful observation and a willingness to see patterns others missed. He started arriving at work earlier, taking longer routes through the neighborhoods surrounding the school, and positioning himself where he could watch the social dynamics without appearing. Obvious, what he discovered made his blood run. Cole, Tyler Morrison and his friends weren't just targeting Maya. Over the course of a week, Jack identified at least 4 other children who displayed the telltale signs of chronic bullying, the defensive postures, the careful scanning of surroundings, the way they flinched when Tyler's group appeared. There was a small boy with thick glasses who ate lunch alone and always chose seats near adults. A girl with a noticeable stutter who seemed to shrink whenever Tyler walked by. Twin brothers who had stopped riding the school bus and now walked the longer route to avoid confrontation. The pattern was sophisticated for children Tyler's age. He and his friends had created a systematic campaign of intimidation that flew under the radar of adult supervision. They were careful about witnesses, creative with their methods, and skilled at making their actions appear accidental or justified. Jack pulled out a burner phone he'd kept from his FBI days, a habit of preparedness that now seemed prescient. He began documenting what he observed, taking photos from a distance, noting times and locations. If he was going to help Maya, he needed evidence that would convince adults to take action. Meanwhile, Sarah had been watching her daughter with growing concern. Maya's mood swings had become more pronounced, periods of hope followed by crashes into despair. The girl who had once shared every detail of her day now answered questions with vague responses and careful deflections. "Maya, we need to talk," Sarah said one evening as her daughter sat at the kitchen table working on homework. "Something's been different about you lately, and I'm worried." Maya looked up from her math worksheet, her pencil frozen mid-calculation. "Different how? You seem happier sometimes, like today when you came home. But other days, you look like you've been crying, and you never want to talk about school anymore." Sarah sat down across from her daughter. "Are you having problems with your classes? With other kids?" Maya's heart raced. She'd been dreading this conversation, knowing her mother was too perceptive to miss the changes indefinitely. "School is fine, Mom. I'm just adjusting like you said I would. Honey, that bruise on your cheek last week, are you sure you just fell?" Maya nodded quickly, not trusting her voice. The lie felt heavier each time she told it. "And you mentioned that man in the park. You haven't been talking to him again, have you?" Maya hesitated a moment too long, and Sarah's expression sharpened. "Maya Elizabeth, I told you to stay away from him. He's not dangerous." "Mom, he's just lonely and nice, and he likes to feed the ducks. That's exactly what predators want you to think," Sarah said, her voice rising with fear and frustration. "They seem nice and safe until they're not. Promise me you'll stop talking to him." Maya felt tears building behind her eyes. Jack was the only person who understood what she was going through, the only adult who had ever offered real help instead of empty platitudes. "Mom, you don't understand. I understand that my 10-year-old daughter is spending time with a strange man I've never met, and that stops now. Promise me, Maya." Faced with her mother's fear and authority, Maya had no choice. "I promise." But as she said the words, she felt something inside her break. The one source of hope and guidance in her life was being taken away, and she was back to facing Tyler and his friends alone. The next day at lunch, Maya didn't go to the park. Instead, she sat on her usual bench near the school fence, trying to eat a sandwich that tasted like cardboard, while Baxter sensed her distress and pressed close to her legs. She kept glancing toward the park, wondering if Jack was waiting for her, wondering if he would think she'd abandoned him the way everyone eventually abandoned everyone. Jack noticed her absence immediately. From his position near the maintenance shed, he could see Maya on her bench, her posture reflecting defeat and isolation. Something had happened, and he could guess what it was. A protective mother discovering her daughter's friendship with an unknown man would naturally respond with fear and prohibition. That afternoon, Jack made a decision that went against every instinct for self-preservation he'd developed over the past 2 years. He walked across the street to Lincoln Elementary and into the main office. "I'd like to speak with the principal about a bullying situation," he told the secretary. Mrs. Rodriguez, the principal, was a tired-looking woman in her 50s who listened to Jack's carefully edited account with the expression of someone who'd heard similar stories too many times. He identified himself as a concerned community member who'd observed troubling behavior during his lunch breaks in the park. Mr. She paused, waiting for him to fill in his name. Brenner. Jack Brenner. Mr. Brenner, I appreciate your concern, but we can't act on observations made from outside school property. If you're not a parent or guardian of one of our students, and if you haven't witnessed actual violence, there's really nothing we can do. What if I told you I've identified at least 5 children who appear to be victims of systematic harassment? Mrs. Rodriguez's expression tightened. Mr. Brenner, are you suggesting our teachers and staff are failing to maintain a safe environment? Jack recognized the defensive posture immediately. This was an administrator more concerned with liability than student welfare. I'm suggesting that sometimes problems aren't visible to people who are busy managing a school full of children. Maybe if I shared my observations, I'm going to stop you right there, Mrs. Rodriguez interrupted. We have policies and procedures for handling bullying complaints. They require reports from students, parents, or staff members. We cannot investigate based on the observations of uninvolved community members. Jack felt his patience wearing thin. And if those students are too afraid to report, if their parents don't know what's happening, then we encourage open communication between families and the school. We have counselors available, anonymous reporting systems, and staff training in recognizing signs of bullying. The words came out like a rehearsed script. Now, if there's nothing else I can help you with, Jack left the building with a clearer understanding of why Maya felt so alone. The school administration was more interested in protecting itself than protecting students. The systems in place were bureaucratic barriers rather than effective interventions. That evening, as Maya walked home with Baxter, Jack fell into step beside them about a block from the school. Maya looked up at him with surprise and relief. I thought you might be angry that I didn't come today, she said. Your mother found out about our talks. Maya nodded miserably. She made me promise to stay away from you. She thinks you might be dangerous. She's protecting you the only way she knows how. But Maya, things are getting worse, and I can't help you if we can't communicate. I know. Tyler was awful today. He got Craig to accidentally spill juice on my homework during lunch. And when I tried to tell Mrs. Patterson, Tyler said I was lying because I was mad about getting a bad grade. Jack felt his anger building, but he kept his voice calm. I need to teach you some things about situational awareness. Ways to protect yourself that don't depend on adults believing you. What kind of things? Always sit where you can see exits. Keep your back to a wall when possible. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. And never, ever go anywhere alone with Tyler or his friends. Not even to the principal's office. Maya absorbed this advice with the seriousness of someone who understood it might be the difference between safety and harm. Are you going to keep helping me, even though my mom said I can't talk to you? Jack was quiet for a moment, weighing his options. I'm going to help you whether we can talk or not. But Maya, you need to understand something important. If things get physically dangerous, you have to tell an adult, even if that adult is your mother, and even if it means she'll worry. What if she doesn't believe me? Then you tell another adult, and another. You keep telling until someone listens. And if no one listens? Jack stopped walking and looked down at her earnest face. Then you find me no matter what anyone else has said. Some rules are more important than others, and your safety is the most important rule of all. Maya nodded, understanding that this man would protect her, even if it meant risking trouble for himself. For the first time since her father died, she felt like someone was truly on her side. As they reached her apartment complex, Jack made one final observation. Maya, Tyler is escalating because the usual tactics aren't working anymore. You've gotten stronger, and that threatens him. That means the next phase is likely to be more serious. More serious how? I don't know yet. But I want you to be ready for anything. That night, Maya lay in bed with Baxter curled beside her, thinking about Jack's warnings and her mother's fears. She was caught between 2 adults who wanted to protect her, but neither fully understood what she was facing. In the darkness of her room, with the weight of tomorrow's school day pressing down on her, Maya made a decision of her own. She would trust Jack's guidance and her mother's love. But ultimately, she would have to save herself. Sarah's discovery came by accident, the way most important revelations do. She'd left work early for the first time in months, a rare gift of a shift ending on time, and decided to surprise Maya by picking her up from school instead of letting her walk home. She arrived just as the final bell rang, positioning herself near the fence, where she knew Maya always collected Baxter. What she saw made her blood freeze. Maya was walking across the street toward the park, deep in conversation with a man Sarah didn't recognize. He was older, probably in his 50s, dressed in work clothes and carrying what appeared to be a maintenance bag. Baxter trotted between them, tail wagging, clearly comfortable with this stranger. Sarah's protective instincts flared to life. Her daughter was not only talking to the man she'd been forbidden to approach, but acting familiar with him in a way that suggested multiple previous encounters. Every warning she'd ever heard about predators and the way they groomed children echoed in her mind as she watched Maya laugh at something the man said. "Maya!" Sarah called sharply, crossing the street with determined strides. Both Maya and Jack turned at the sound of her voice. Maya's face went pale, while Jack straightened with the careful stillness of someone preparing for confrontation. "Mom," Maya said weakly. "You're early." "Apparently not early enough," Sarah said, her voice tight with fear and anger. "Who is this man? And why are you talking to him after I specifically told you not to?" Jack stepped forward slightly, his hands visible and non-threatening. "Mrs., I don't want to hear from you," Sarah snapped. "Maya, get away from him right now." Maya looked between her mother and Jack, torn between obedience and loyalty. "Mom, please, let me explain." "There's nothing to explain. You promised me you wouldn't talk to strangers, and here you are having secret meetings with a man I've never met." Sarah's voice carried the sharp edge of panic. "Maya, come here now." Reluctantly, Maya moved to her mother's side, and Sarah immediately positioned herself between her daughter and Jack. "I don't know what you think you're doing," she said to Jack, "but if I see you near my daughter again, I'm calling the police." "Mom, I understand your concern," Jack said calmly, "but I think if you'll let me explain, I don't want explanations from someone who's been secretly meeting with my 10-year-old daughter. That's not normal behavior." Jack recognized the fear in Sarah's voice, the maternal instinct that was screaming danger, even though the threat wasn't what she imagined. "You're right to be protective," he said. "If I were in your position, I'd react the same way. But Maya came to me for help, and I've been trying to provide it." "Help with what?" Maya and Jack exchanged glances, and Sarah caught the silent communication between them. "Maya, what kind of help?" Maya's eyes filled with tears. "Mom, some kids at school have been really mean to me, and Jack was teaching me how to handle it." "What kids?" "What do you mean, really mean?" The whole story came pouring out then. The name-calling, the physical harassment, the systematic intimidation that had been going on for months. Sarah listened with growing horror and guilt, realizing that her daughter had been suffering in silence while she'd been too overwhelmed with work to notice. "Why didn't you tell me?" Sarah whispered. "Because you already worry about everything, and I didn't want to make it worse," Maya said through her tears. "Jack was helping me be stronger." Sarah looked at Jack with new eyes, seeing him not as a potential predator, but as someone who had stepped in where she had failed. The realization was both relieving and devastating. "What kind of help have you been giving her?" she asked quietly. Jack chose his words carefully. "Confidence-building techniques, ways to carry herself that make bullies less likely to target her. Documentation strategies for when adults need proof of what's happening. And you know about these things because I used to work in law enforcement. I specialized in cases involving children who were being hurt by others." Sarah studied his face, looking for deception and finding only weary honesty. "Used to? I retired early after a case went wrong. But when Maya asked for help, I couldn't turn away." Sarah felt the weight of her own ignorance settling on her shoulders. "Show me your identification." Jack pulled out his wallet and handed her his driver's license. Sarah noted the name, Jack Brenner, and memorized the details. "Maya, go wait by the car with Baxter while I talk to Mr. Brenner." When Maya was out of earshot, Sarah's composure cracked. I had no idea things were this bad. She seemed fine, quiet sometimes, but I thought it was just adjustment to the new school. She was protecting you the same way you're protecting her, Jack said gently. But Sarah, may I call you Sarah? This situation is escalating beyond what Maya can handle alone. What do you mean, escalating? Jack pulled out his phone and showed her photos he'd taken from his observations around the school. Tyler Morrison and his friends aren't just picking on Maya. They've created a systematic campaign of intimidation targeting multiple children. And yesterday, things got physical in a way that suggests they're moving to a new level. Sarah looked at the images. Children walking with defensive postures. Clear evidence of social isolation, the kind of documentation she realized only someone with investigative experience would think to gather. What happened yesterday? Tyler got another student to pour juice on Maya's homework, then convinced the teacher that Maya was lying about it being deliberate. It's a pattern of gaslighting that's more sophisticated than typical childhood bullying. Sarah felt sick. What kind of children behave like this? Children who are modeling behavior they've learned from adults, Jack said grimly. I did some research on Tyler's family. His father has a history of intimidation and harassment charges. His older brother has been arrested twice for assault. This isn't just playground meanness, it's learned predatory behavior. The revelation hit Sarah like a physical blow. My daughter is being targeted by future criminals, potentially. Which is why she needs adults who understand the dynamics and know how to intervene effectively. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, processing the implications. What do you think we should do? The "we" in her question signaled a shift that didn't go unnoticed by either of them. Sarah was accepting Jack as an ally rather than a threat. First, we need to document everything Maya has experienced. Then we approach the school as a united front, parent and community member with law enforcement background. If they won't listen, we escalate to the school board and local police. And if none of that works, Jack's expression darkened. Then we get creative. Over the next hour, sitting in Sarah's car while Maya played with Baxter in the nearby park, Jack taught both mother and daughter about recognizing manipulation tactics, understanding predatory behavior, and building cases that adults would take seriously. Tyler uses isolation as a weapon, Jack explained. He makes Maya feel like she's the only one being targeted, like there's something wrong with her that justifies his behavior. Classic abuser psychology. Sarah watched her daughter throw a stick for Baxter, noting how much more animated Maya seemed with Jack's support. I've been so focused on providing for her that I missed the signs she was in emotional danger. You were doing what you thought was best. But now we work together. Their planning was interrupted by Maya running back to the car, her face flushed with excitement and fear. Jack, I think Tyler's dad is here. Jack looked where Maya pointed and saw a large man in work clothes approaching them with purposeful strides. Behind him walked Tyler and two other boys Jack didn't recognize, but who carried themselves with the same entitled aggression. Sarah, take Maya and get in the car, Jack said quietly. What's wrong? Tyler's father is Bill Morrison. He's got a reputation for solving problems with intimidation. If he's here, it means Tyler told him about our conversation yesterday. Bill Morrison stopped about 10 feet from Jack's position, his sons arrayed behind him like a pack. You the one who's been bothering my boy? Jack stood slowly, his posture relaxed but ready. I haven't bothered anyone. I was having a conversation with a friend. Tyler says you've been harassing him about some made-up bullying story. Says you threatened him. Jack glanced at Tyler, noting the smirk on the boy's face. The kid had escalated to involving his father, which meant the situation was about to become much more complicated. Tyler's been hurting children, Jack said calmly, including the little girl you just saw. If he told you I threatened him, he's lying. Bill Morrison's face flushed red. You calling my son a liar? I'm calling your son a bully who's now hiding behind his father because someone finally stood up to him. The confrontation might have turned physical then, but Sarah chose that moment to step out of her car. Excuse me, she called. Is there a problem here? Bill Morrison looked at Sarah, then at Maya, visible through the car window, and his expression shifted slightly. Threatening a man was one thing, but doing it in front of a mother and child was harder to justify. "Your friend here has been harassing my boy at school," Bill said. "This man has been helping my daughter deal with bullies," Sarah replied firmly. "If your son is one of those bullies, then perhaps we should be talking to the school administration instead of having confrontations in the park." Jack felt a surge of respect for Sarah's courage. She was standing up to a man who outweighed her by 100 pounds, protecting both Maya and Jack with nothing but maternal authority and moral certainty. Bill Morrison looked between Sarah, Jack, and the car where Maya waited. "This ain't over," he said finally. "You people better stay away from my family, and your family better stay away from innocent children," Sarah shot back. As the Morrisons walked away, Jack realized that the situation had just escalated beyond anything he'd prepared for. Tyler now had adult backing for his behavior, which meant Maya was facing threats that went far beyond typical schoolyard bullying. "Sarah," Jack said quietly, "I think it's time to consider removing Maya from that school. We can't afford private school. Then we make the public school safe for her. Whatever it takes." Sarah looked at her daughter, then at Jack, and made a decision that would change all their lives. "What do you need from me?" "Trust," Jack said, "and the willingness to fight for your daughter when the system fails her. You have both." As they drove home, Maya finally felt something she hadn't experienced in months, the security of knowing adults were taking her seriously and working together to protect her. But in the back of her mind, she wondered what price they would all pay for standing up to people like the Morrisons. Jack's sleepless night was spent making phone calls to contacts he'd hoped never to use again. The confrontation with Bill Morrison had triggered something in his investigative instincts, a nagging feeling that Tyler's bullying behavior was more than just learned aggression. By dawn, he had answers that made him wish he'd stayed ignorant. The call came through just as Maya was getting ready for school. Jack's phone rang with a number he recognized from his FBI days. "Brenner, you've stirred up a hornet's nest," Agent Maria Santos said without preamble. "Bill Morrison isn't just some local troublemaker. He's been on our watch list for 2 years as muscle for the Kozlov organization." Jack felt ice forming in his stomach. The Kozlov organization was a money laundering operation that had been moving into smaller towns throughout the region, using intimidation and violence to establish territory. "What kind of muscle work?" "Debt collection, witness intimidation, property acquisition through fear tactics. We've never been able to make anything stick because people are too scared to testify against him. And now I've put myself on his radar by defending a 10-year-old girl. It gets worse. Jack, we've been tracking increased activity in your area over the past 6 months. New businesses being pressured to use Kozlov services, property owners suddenly eager to sell below market value. If Morrison's son is targeting specific children at school, it might not be random bullying." Jack closed his eyes, pieces of a larger puzzle beginning to form. "You think they're using the kids to pressure parents? Think about it. Your little girl, Maya, right? Her mother works at the hospital. Hospitals are prime targets for money laundering through medical billing schemes. What if Tyler wasn't just picking on Maya because she was new and vulnerable? What if he was told to make her family miserable until her mother became desperate enough to accept help from the wrong kind of people?" The implication hit Jack like a physical blow. Maya hadn't been randomly selected as a victim. She'd been targeted because her mother represented a potential asset for criminal exploitation. "Maria, I need everything you have on Morrison and any connections to the hospital where Sarah works." Jack listened to me carefully. "You've been out of the game for 2 years. You have no official standing, no backup, and no authority. If the Kozlovs think you're a threat, they won't hesitate to eliminate you. A 10-year-old girl is in danger. Then call local police. Let us handle it through proper channels. You know how that works. By the time bureaucracy moves, Maya and her mother could be dead or disappeared." There was a long pause. "What do you need?" 2 hours later, Jack was standing in Sarah's living room with a manila folder full of documents that painted a terrifying picture of their situation. Sarah sat on her couch with Maya beside her, both of them listening with growing horror as Jack explained what he'd discovered. Bill Morrison works for a criminal organization that specializes in forcing honest people into corrupt arrangements, Jack said. They identify targets with access to businesses or institutions that could be useful for money laundering. Then they create pressure until those targets become desperate enough to accept help. Sarah's face had gone pale. You think they targeted Maya to get to me? I think Tyler was told to make your daughter's life miserable until you became willing to do anything to make it stop, including accepting a job offer from people who would use your medical credentials for illegal purposes. Maya looked confused. I don't understand. Tyler hurt me because of Mom's job. Jack knelt down to Maya's eye level. Tyler hurt you because his father told him to. The bullying wasn't about you being new or different. It was about making your mother feel helpless and alone. The revelation transformed Sarah's fear into rage. You mean my daughter has been suffering because criminals want to use me? It's more than that, Jack said grimly. He opened the folder and pulled out hospital employment records Maria had obtained through FBI channels. 3 nurses have been hired at Millbrook General in the past year. All 3 had children who experienced severe bullying before their parents accepted positions that gave them access to patient billing systems. Sarah stared at the documents. That's impossible. This is a small town. People know each other. Small towns are perfect for this kind of operation. Less oversight, more personal relationships, easier to make problems disappear. Jack pulled out another set of papers. Look at these property transfers in your neighborhood. 17 families have sold their homes below market value in the past 8 months, all after their children experienced problems at school. The pattern was undeniable once laid out clearly. The Kozloff organization had turned Lincoln Elementary into a recruitment tool, using children's suffering to manipulate their parents into cooperation. But why haven't people fought back? Sarah asked, because anyone who tried faced escalating problems until they gave in or left town. And Jack's expression darkened, because someone was making sure the school administration didn't look too closely at the bullying patterns. He showed them the final piece of evidence, financial records showing payments from a Kozlov front company to Mrs. Rodriguez, the principal who had dismissed Jack's concerns about systematic harassment. Maya had been listening with the intensity of someone trying to understand how her world had become so dangerous. Jack, does this mean Tyler will keep hurting kids until their parents do what his dad wants? Not if we stop him first. Sarah looked at Jack with new understanding. This is why you really left the FBI, isn't it? You discovered something like this before. Jack was quiet for a long moment. 2 years ago, I was investigating a similar operation in Ohio. Children were being used as leverage against their parents, but the case was more advanced. By the time we understood the full scope, 3 families had already been forced into criminal cooperation. What happened? I tried to work within the system, build a case that would hold up in court. While I was gathering evidence, one of the targeted children, a little girl named Emma, was severely injured in what was supposed to be a warning to her father. Jack's voice carried the weight of old guilt. She survived, but she'll never be the same. Her father blamed me for not acting sooner, and he was right. Sarah reached over and took his hand. You were trying to do things the right way. The right way failed, Emma. I won't let it fail, Maya. Maya had been processing this information with the remarkable resilience of children. So what do we do now? Jack looked at both of them, knowing that what he was about to propose would change all their lives irreversibly. We expose the entire operation, but first we make sure you're both safe. How? Jack opened his toolkit and pulled out his FBI badge, the one he'd kept hidden beneath maintenance tools for 2 years. I stopped pretending to be someone I'm not. Sarah stared at the badge. You're still an FBI agent? Technically, I'm on extended leave, but I never formally resigned, and I still have contacts who trust my judgment. He looked at Maya. Honey, I need you to understand something important. When adults use children to hurt other adults, it's not the children's fault. Tyler isn't the real enemy here. His father is. Tyler is being used just like you were. Maya nodded solemnly. Will Tyler get in trouble when you catch his dad? Tyler will get help. Real help from people who understand that children who hurt other children are usually being hurt themselves. Sarah stood up, her determination visible in every line of her body. What do you need us to do? First, Maya doesn't go back to school until this is resolved. It's not safe. I can't miss work to homeschool her. You won't have to. I'm going to call in some favors and get federal protection for both of you until we can eliminate the threat. Maya looked between the two adults who had become the most important people in her world. Are we going to be okay? Jack knelt down again, his voice gentle but certain. Maya, I promise you that no one will ever hurt you again because of what your mother does for a living. And I promise that other children won't have to go through what you've been through. How can you promise that? Jack's expression hardened with resolve. Because I'm done hiding from who I used to be. Sometimes the only way to protect innocent people is to be more dangerous than the people who want to hurt them. As if summoned by his words, Jack's phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Your new friends should be more careful about who they trust. Accidents happen to people who ask too many questions. Jack showed the message to Sarah, whose face went white. They know we talked to you, which means they're scared. Scared people make mistakes. Jack pocketed his phone and looked at both Maya and Sarah. Pack whatever you need for a few days. We're leaving town until I can arrange proper protection. Where will we go? Somewhere safe, while I remind some very bad people why it was a mistake to threaten a federal agent's family. The word family hung in the air between them, and Maya felt something warm spread through her chest, despite the danger surrounding them. For the first time since her father died, she was part of something bigger than just her and her mother trying to survive. As they packed their essential belongings, Maya found the notebook Jack had given her for documenting Tyler's harassment. The pages were filled with careful recordings of dates, times, and incidents that had seemed like isolated cruelties. Now she understood they were evidence of something much larger and more sinister. She tore out a blank page and wrote a note. Tyler, your dad made you hurt me, but Jack is going to help both of us. You don't have to be scared anymore either. When Jack saw what she'd written, he smiled with pride. You're going to make an excellent witness someday. Maya, the best agents always remember that even the bad guys started out as somebody's children. As they loaded their belongings into Jack's truck, Sarah looked back at the small apartment that had represented safety and a fresh start. Now it felt like a trap they'd barely escaped. Jack, what happens if we can't stop them? Jack started the engine, his hands steady on the wheel despite the magnitude of what they were facing. Then we run until we find people who can. But Sarah, I didn't spend 20 years learning how to hunt predators just to let them destroy the best thing that's happened to me in years. Maya, buckled safely between the two adults, reached over and took Jack's hand. The best thing? You and your mother gave me a reason to remember who I used to be. Now I'm going to show you why the FBI trained me to be very good at my job. As they drove away from Millbrook, Maya felt fear and excitement warring in her chest. The man beside her was no longer the quiet maintenance worker who fed ducks in the park. He was someone who fought monsters for a living, and he'd chosen to fight for her. The safe house was a nondescript cabin 40 miles outside Millbrook, hidden among pine trees and accessible only by a dirt road that wound through state forest land. Jack had used it twice during his active FBI years for protecting witnesses, and the isolation that had once felt oppressive now provided exactly the security Maya and Sarah needed. Sarah stood at the cabin's front window, watching Jack pace the porch while talking intensely on his phone. In the 3 hours since they'd arrived, he'd made 7 calls to numbers she didn't recognize, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to coordinating complex operations. Mom, is Jack really going to stop the bad people? Maya asked from the couch where she sat with Baxter pressed against her side. I think he's going to try very hard, Sarah said, though uncertainty colored her voice. The man outside bore little resemblance to the quiet maintenance worker who'd fed ducks in the park. This Jack moved with purpose and spoke in the clipped tones of someone used to making life-or-death decisions. Jack ended his call and came inside, his expression grim but determined. "Okay, here's where we stand. The FBI task force that's been tracking the Kozlov organization is willing to fast-track an investigation based on what we've uncovered. But they need testimony from victims and witnesses to build a case strong enough to make arrests stick." "What kind of testimony?" Sarah asked. "Maya, I need you to tell them everything Tyler and his friends did to you. Every incident, every threat, every time you felt unsafe. The agents need to understand that this wasn't random bullying. It was systematic intimidation designed to pressure your mother." Maya nodded solemnly. "I can do that. I wrote it all down in the notebook you gave me. Good girl. But Maya, there's something else. The agents found evidence that Tyler's father forced him to target other children too. We think Tyler might be willing to tell the truth about what his father made him do, but only if he knows he won't be the only kid speaking up." Sarah frowned. "You want Maya to help Tyler? After everything he put her through?" "I want Maya to help stop a criminal organization that's been hurting entire families," Jack said gently. "Tyler is as much a victim as she is. He just happened to be forced into the role of perpetrator instead of target." Maya was quiet for a long moment, processing this perspective. Tyler was scared of his dad too. Very scared. The FBI found evidence that Bill Morrison has been physically abusing Tyler for months, demanding that he intimidate specific children at school. When Tyler didn't do it well enough, or when his targets fought back, his father hurt him. The revelation shifted Maya's understanding of everything that had happened. "So when I started standing up to him, his dad got mad and hurt Tyler more?" "Probably. Which means Tyler was trapped just like you were, but in a different way." Sarah watched her daughter wrestle with the concept of her tormentor as another victim. "Maya, you don't have to help Tyler if you don't want to. You don't owe him anything, but if I don't help, other kids might get hurt the way I did." Jack knelt down beside Maya's chair. "Other kids are already being hurt. We've identified 6 more families in similar situations across 3 counties. This operation has been growing for 2 years, and it won't stop unless someone stops it." Maya looked down at Baxter, who seemed to sense the weight of the decision she was contemplating. "What would I have to do?" "Talk to FBI agents about what happened to you. Answer their questions honestly. And maybe, if you're brave enough, talk to Tyler when they bring him in for questioning. Let him know that telling the truth about his father won't make you hate him. Will his dad go to jail? If we can build a strong enough case, yes. Bill Morrison and the people he works for will go to prison for a very long time." Maya was quiet for several minutes, and Jack respected her need to think. Finally, she looked up at him with determined eyes. "If I help stop Tyler's dad, will that keep other kids safe?" "It will help keep other kids safe. But Maya, this won't be easy. The agents will ask you to remember things that were scary and painful." "I remember them anyway," Maya said simply. "At least this way, remembering them will help somebody." Jack felt a surge of pride and protectiveness toward this remarkable child. "You're braver than most adults I've worked with." Over the next several hours, Jack coordinated with his former colleagues to arrange a carefully orchestrated operation. Maya would give her testimony at the FBI field office, with child psychologists present to ensure her emotional well-being. Simultaneously, agents would execute search warrants on Morrison's property and the homes of 3 other Kozlov associates. "The timing is critical," Jack explained to Sarah as they prepared dinner from supplies he'd stocked in the cabin. "Once we move on Morrison, the entire organization will go into damage control mode. We'll have maybe 24 hours before they start destroying evidence and intimidating witnesses." Sarah nodded, though Jack could see the strain in her face. "This feels surreal. 3 days ago, my biggest worry was Maya's adjustment to a new school. 3 days ago, you didn't know you were living in the middle of a criminal conspiracy. But Sarah, I need you to understand something important. After tomorrow, your life in Millbrook is over. Even if we arrest Morrison and his associates, the Kozlov organization will remember that you helped bring them down. The reality hit Sarah like a physical blow. Where will we go? The FBI has a witness protection program. But it would mean new identities, new lives, possibly never seeing your friends or family again. I don't have much family left, and we haven't been in Millbrook long enough to make real friends. There's another option, Jack said quietly. You could come with me. Sarah looked at him in surprise. Come with you where? I've been offered a position with a joint task force that specializes in crimes against children. It would mean traveling, living in different places, as cases require. Maya would have to be homeschooled, but she'd see more of the world than most kids ever do. And you? Jack met her eyes. I'd be doing work that matters again, with two people who've reminded me what I was fighting for in the first place. Sarah felt tears building behind her eyes. Jack, we've known each other for less than a week. I've known some people for 20 years who never mattered as much as you and Maya do. Before Sarah could respond, Maya appeared in the kitchen doorway with Baxter behind her. Jack, there's a car coming up the road. Jack immediately moved to the window, his hand instinctively reaching for the weapon he'd retrieved from a hidden compartment in the cabin. A black SUV was approaching slowly, but Jack recognized the license plate from his FBI contacts. It's okay, he said, though he didn't relax until he saw Agent Santos emerge from the driver's seat. Maya, these are the people who are going to help us stop the bad guys. Agent Santos was accompanied by Dr. Emily Chen, a child psychologist who specialized in working with young victims of crime. Jack had requested her specifically because of her reputation for making children feel safe during difficult testimony. Maya, Dr. Chen said after Jack had made introductions, I understand you've been very brave about a scary situation. I'm here to make sure that helping the FBI agents doesn't feel scary, too. Maya looked at the woman's kind face and felt some of her nervousness ease. Will I have to see Tyler's dad? No, absolutely not. You'll only talk to Agent Santos and me, and only about things you feel comfortable sharing. Agent Santos pulled Jack aside while Dr. Chen began building rapport with Maya. We executed the warrant on Morrison's house 2 hours ago, found enough evidence to charge him with conspiracy, witness intimidation, and child abuse. But Jack, there's something else you need to know. What? We also found evidence that Morrison's been tracking your movements since you first approached the school about the bullying. They know about this cabin. Jack felt ice form in his stomach. How long do we have? Maybe 4 hours before they can organize a response. But Jack, there's more. The Kozlov organization has a reputation for eliminating witnesses before they can testify. If they think Maya can hurt them, then we don't give them the chance. Jack's voice carried the steel of someone who'd made similar decisions before. How soon can you get Maya's statement on record? We can do it right now if she's ready. Jack looked toward the living room, where Maya was showing Dr. Chen her documentation notebook, while Baxter supervised protectively. Maya's been ready for months. She just needed adults who were willing to listen. The next 3 hours passed in a blur of careful questioning and meticulous documentation. Maya told her story with remarkable clarity, guided by Dr. Chen's gentle prompts and supported by the detailed notes she'd kept at Jack's suggestion. She spoke about Tyler's escalating harassment, the systematic nature of the intimidation, and her growing understanding that she'd been targeted for reasons beyond her control. More importantly, she demonstrated a maturity and resilience that impressed even seasoned FBI agents. When Agent Santos asked if she understood that her testimony might put her family in danger, Maya looked directly at her and said, "Not helping would put other families in danger. That would be worse." As evening approached, Jack made his final preparations for what he knew would be a dangerous night. The Kozlov organization would either retreat and abandon their Millbrook operation, or they would try to eliminate the witnesses who could destroy them. Jack had dealt with both scenarios before, and he preferred the direct confrontation to the uncertainty of running. "Sarah, I need you to take Maya and Baxter to the second safe house," he said. handing her a set of keys and directions to another location. Agent Santos will escort you there and maintain protection until this is resolved. Where will you be? Making sure Morrison and his people understand that threatening my family was the worst mistake they ever made. Maya overheard the conversation and came to stand beside Jack. Your family? Jack knelt down to her level one more time. Maya, in the past week, you and your mother have become the most important people in my world. If that doesn't make us family, I don't know what does. Maya hugged him tightly. Be careful, Jack. We need you to come back to us. I will, he promised. I have too much to live for now to take unnecessary risks. As Agent Santos prepared to escort Sarah and Maya to safety, Jack armed himself with weapons and equipment he'd hidden throughout the cabin. The quiet maintenance worker was gone completely now, replaced by the federal agent who'd spent 20 years hunting predators more dangerous than the Kozlov organization. But this time, he wasn't just fighting for justice or duty. He was fighting for a little girl who'd asked a stranger for help and trusted him to keep her safe. He was fighting for a woman who'd opened her heart despite every reason to be cautious. He was fighting for the family he'd found in the most unlikely circumstances, and Jack Brenner had never lost a fight when the stakes were personal. The coordinated arrests began at dawn, precisely as the school buses started their morning routes through Millbrook. Jack had insisted on the timing. He wanted the entire community to witness the takedown of people who had terrorized their children while hiding behind respectable facades. From his position in Agent Santos's surveillance van, Jack watched through high-powered binoculars as tactical teams simultaneously hit 4 locations across town. At Bill Morrison's house, agents found him loading files into his truck, clearly preparing to flee. At the home of Craig Foster's father, a mechanic who'd been laundering money through fraudulent auto repair bills, the arrest happened. In the driveway, as neighbors watched in shock, Target 3 is in custody, came the voice through Jack's earpiece. Target 3 was Mrs. Rodriguez, the school principal, who had been taking payments to ignore systematic bullying complaints. Beautiful, Jack murmured, feeling the satisfaction of a plan executed perfectly. But the most important arrest was happening at Tyler Morrison's house, where child services workers accompanied the FBI agents. Jack had specifically requested that Tyler be treated as a victim rather than a criminal. Despite his role in tormenting other children, through his earpiece, Jack heard Agent Martinez's voice. We've got the boy. He's scared but cooperative, asking for the FBI agent who promised he wouldn't be in trouble. Tell him I kept my promise, Jack said into his radio. And tell him Maya says hi. At the second safe house, Maya was watching live news coverage of the arrests with Dr. Chen and her mother. When the reporter mentioned that the operation had been led by former FBI Special Agent Jack Brenner, who had been working undercover as a maintenance worker, Maya felt a surge of pride. Mom, look, Maya said, pointing at the screen where Jack's official FBI photo was displayed. That's what he looked like when he was catching bad guys before. Sarah studied the photo, Jack in a suit and tie, his expression serious and professional. It was hard to reconcile that image with the gentleman who had fed ducks and taught her daughter confidence techniques. He gave up that life to help us, Sarah said quietly. The news coverage continued, with interviews of shocked community members who couldn't believe that organized crime had infiltrated their small town. But Maya was focused on a different part of the story. The reporter mentioned that several children would be providing testimony to help prosecutors build their case. Dr. Chen, Maya said. When do I get to tell the judge what Tyler's dad made him do? Actually, Maya, your testimony yesterday was so comprehensive that the prosecutors might not need you to testify in court. You've already helped more than you know. Maya felt a moment of disappointment. But I want people to understand that Tyler was scared too. They will understand because of what you told us. But Maya, there's something else. The FBI wants you to help them with Tyler directly. Would you be willing to talk to him? Before Maya could answer, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. When she opened it, she found a picture that made her gasp. It was Tyler, sitting in what looked like a police station, holding a sign that read, "I'm sorry." "Maya, Agent Santos sent that," Dr. Chen explained. "Tyler asked if he could apologize to you. He wants you to know that everything he did was because his father threatened to hurt him if he didn't make you miserable." Maya stared at the photo, seeing Tyler's bruised face and hollow eyes. For the first time, she understood that he had been as trapped as she was, just in a different kind of prison. "Can I talk to him?" An hour later, Maya found herself in a video conference room, looking at Tyler's image on a large screen. He appeared smaller than she remembered, huddled in a chair that seemed too big for him. Agent Santos sat beside him, while Dr. Chen remained with Maya. "Hi, Tyler," Maya said softly. "Maya, I'm really sorry." Tyler's voice was barely audible. "I didn't want to hurt you, but my dad said if I didn't make kids scared at school, he would—" Tyler's voice broke. "It's okay, Tyler. Jack explained what your dad made you do." "Who's Jack?" "The man who helped me be brave enough to tell adults what was happening. He says you're brave, too, for telling the truth about your dad." Tyler looked up at the camera with surprise. "He thinks I'm brave?" "He says kids who hurt other kids are usually being hurt themselves. He says you needed help just like I did." For the first time in months, Tyler smiled. "Are you still mad at me?" Maya thought about all the pain Tyler had caused her, all the days she'd dreaded going to school, all the nights she'd cried herself to sleep. But looking at his scared face, she realized that holding on to anger would only hurt them both. "I'm not mad anymore," she said. "But Tyler, you have to promise me something." "What?" "Promise you'll tell the agents everything your dad made you do. All the kids he made you hurt. Because they deserve to feel safe too." Tyler nodded earnestly. "I already started telling them. Maya, there are kids in other schools too. My dad had a whole list." Maya felt her heart clench at the thought of other children suffering the way she had. "Then we have to help them all." "We?" "You and me and Jack and all the grown-ups who are going to make sure this never happens again." After the video call ended, Maya sat quietly for several minutes, processing the strange turn her life had taken. A week ago, Tyler Morrison had been her worst nightmare. Now he was another child who needed protection from adults who had failed him. "How do you feel?" Dr. Chen asked. "Different," Maya said thoughtfully. "Like I'm not just Maya who got picked on anymore. Like I'm Maya who helped stop bad people from hurting kids." "That's exactly who you are," Maya smiled, understanding for the first time that surviving something terrible didn't make her a victim. It made her someone who could help other people survive too. The arrests continued throughout the day, reaching deep into the network that had been exploiting Millbrook's families. By evening, 17 people were in custody, including 3 school board members, 5 business owners, and 2 police officers who had been paid to ignore complaints about intimidation. But the most important victory wasn't the number of arrests. It was the group of children who were finally free to go to school without fear, and the parents who no longer had to choose between their safety and their cooperation with criminals. When Jack finally returned to the safe house that evening, he found Maya and Sarah waiting for him on the porch, with Baxter between them. Maya ran to him and hugged him tightly. "Did you stop all the bad people?" "We stopped the ones who were hurting you," Jack said. "And we made sure they can't hurt anyone else." "Jack," Maya said, looking up at him with serious eyes, "Tyler wants to say thank you." "Thank me? For what?" "For keeping your promise that he wouldn't be in trouble for telling the truth about his dad." Jack felt something warm settle in his chest. "Maya, you know what the best part of today was?" "What?" "Watching you choose to help Tyler, even after everything he put you through. That's what real strength looks like." As they walked back into the house together, Maya realized that the scared little girl who had approached a stranger in the park was gone forever. In her place was someone braver, someone who understood that protecting others was more important than protecting yourself from pain. She had found her voice, and she was never going to lose it again. 3 weeks after the arrests, Maya stood at the podium in Lincoln Elementary's auditorium, looking out at an audience of students, parents, teachers, and community members who had gathered for what the local newspaper called a town hall on school safety. The room was packed beyond capacity, with people standing along the walls and spilling into the hallway. Maya's hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the microphone, but her voice was clear and strong when she began to speak. "My name is Maya, and 3 weeks ago, I was the scared kid who ate lunch alone every day because I was afraid of what Tyler Morrison and his friends might do to me." A murmur went through the audience. Many of these people had children at the school, but few had understood the extent of what had been happening in their community. "I want to tell you what it's like to be afraid to go to school every day, what it's like to pretend everything is fine when someone is hurting you, and what it's like when you finally find adults who believe you and know how to help." Sarah sat in the front row, tears streaming down her face as she watched her daughter transform her pain into purpose. Beside her, Jack observed the crowd, noting which parents looked surprised by Maya's revelations and which ones seemed to recognize their own children's experiences. "Tyler Morrison hurt me for months," Maya continued. "He called me names, destroyed my things, and made me feel like there was something wrong with me that made me deserve to be treated badly. But what I learned from the FBI agents who helped us is that Tyler was being hurt too." The audience stirred with confusion. Maya had insisted on including this perspective in her speech, despite advice from some adults to focus only on her own victimization. Tyler's father told him to hurt me and other kids, and when Tyler didn't do it well enough, his father hurt him. So Tyler was scared too, just like I was. The real problem wasn't Tyler. It was the adults who taught him that hurting people was normal. Dr. Chen, who had been working with Maya to prepare for this moment, felt proud of the girl's mature understanding of complex dynamics. "I want every kid here to know that if someone is hurting you at school, it's not your fault, and it's not something you have to handle by yourself. There are adults who know how to help, but they can't help if they don't know what's happening." Maya paused, looking directly at a group of younger students in the third row. "Some of you might be scared to tell adults because you think no one will believe you, or because you're worried about making things worse. I was scared of those things too. But hiding from bullies doesn't make them go away. It just makes them think they can keep hurting people." She pulled out a piece of paper with notes she'd written, though she barely needed to refer to them. "The man who helped me is named Jack Brenner. A month ago, I thought he was just a maintenance worker who liked to feed ducks. But he used to be an FBI agent who protected children for a living. When I asked him for help, he didn't tell me to ignore the bullies or try to make friends with them. He taught me how to be strong, how to document what was happening, and how to find adults who would take action." Jack shifted uncomfortably in his seat as hundreds of eyes turned toward him. He'd never wanted public recognition, but Maya had insisted that people needed to understand how adults could effectively intervene in bullying situations. Jack could have told me it wasn't his problem. He could have stayed safe and quiet, but he risked his own safety to protect me and my mom and other families in our town. That's what real grown-ups do. They protect children, even when it's hard or dangerous. The applause that followed was thunderous, and Jack found himself fighting back emotions he'd kept buried for 2 years. The FBI had already offered him a position, heading a new task force on organized crime targeting children. But until this moment, he hadn't been sure he was ready to return to that world. "Now I want to talk to the kids who have been hurting other kids," Maya said, and the auditorium went completely silent. "Maybe someone told you to do it. Maybe you thought it would make you popular or powerful. Maybe you were angry about things in your own life and you took it out on people who couldn't fight back." Several students shifted uncomfortably in their seats. "I forgave Tyler because I learned that hurt people often hurt other people. But forgiveness doesn't mean there shouldn't be consequences. If you've been hurting other kids, you need to stop right now and get help. Because someday, someone like Jack is going to catch you, and then it will be too late to make things right." Maya looked out at the sea of faces, seeing a mixture of admiration, surprise, and recognition. "The last thing I want to say is this: being strong doesn't mean you never get scared. Being strong means you ask for help when you need it. You stand up for people who can't stand up for themselves. And you never let anyone convince you that cruelty is normal. She folded her notes and stepped back from the microphone. Thank you for listening. And if any kid here needs to talk to someone about bullying, you can find me at lunch. I'll be the one feeding the ducks with Jack. The standing ovation lasted for 5 minutes. Parents wiped tears from their eyes, while children looked at Maya with new respect. Several students approached her afterward, whispering confessions about their own experiences with bullying, both as victims and perpetrators. As the crowd dispersed, the interim principal, Mrs. Williams, who had replaced Mrs. Rodriguez after her arrest, approached Maya and her family. Maya, that was remarkable. The school board would like to work with you to develop new anti-bullying policies. We want to make sure something like this never happens again. Maya looked up at Jack and Sarah. Can we do that? Jack smiled. I think we can do anything we set our minds to. As they walked out of the school together, Maya felt the weight of transformation settling around her like a warm blanket. She was no longer the scared girl who had asked a stranger for help. She was someone who could help others find their own courage, and for the first time since her father's death, she knew exactly who she was meant to become. 6 months later, Maya walked through the hallways of Lincoln Elementary with the confident stride of someone who knew exactly where she belonged. The school had been transformed since the arrests. New policies, new leadership, and most importantly, a new culture where children felt safe to speak up when something was wrong. "Maya, wait up!" called Emma Rodriguez, a second grader who had started eating lunch with Maya's anti-bullying support group. Emma's confidence had blossomed under Maya's mentorship, and she now served as an informal ambassador to younger students who were struggling with peer conflicts. Maya turned and smiled, adjusting her backpack, a new one, sturdy and bright blue, that Jack had given her for her 11th birthday. The torn strap that had once symbolized her vulnerability was now just a memory. "Did you remember to bring the permission slips for our field trip to the FBI training center?" Maya asked. Emma nodded enthusiastically. "My mom was so excited when she signed it. She said not many kids get to tour an FBI facility." The field trip was part of a new program Jack had developed in partnership with the Bureau. Educational visits designed to teach children about personal safety, recognizing manipulation, and understanding that law enforcement officers were there to help them. Maya had been instrumental in designing the curriculum, drawing from her own experiences to help other children understand the difference between harmless teasing and dangerous predatory behavior. As they walked toward the cafeteria, Maya noticed Tyler Morrison sitting alone at a corner table. He'd returned to school 2 months earlier, after intensive counseling and a carefully monitored reintegration process. His father was serving a 15-year sentence for conspiracy and child abuse, while Tyler lived with his aunt and received ongoing therapy to address the trauma he'd experienced. "Hey, Tyler," Maya called, detouring toward his table. "Want to sit with us today?" Tyler looked up with surprise and gratitude. Their relationship remained complicated. Forgiveness was a process, not a single moment, but Maya had made it clear that his isolation wouldn't continue as long as he was genuinely trying to change. "Thanks, Maya, I'd like that." As the 3 children settled at Maya's usual table near the windows, Tyler pulled out a notebook similar to the one Jack had given Maya months earlier. "I've been documenting positive interactions like you suggested. Yesterday, I helped a kindergartner who dropped his lunch, and it felt different." "Good different," Maya nodded approvingly. "Jack says the best way to heal from hurting people is to practice helping people instead." At the mention of Jack's name, all 3 children brightened. Jack had become something of a local hero since the arrests, but more importantly, he'd become a fixture in their daily lives. Coaching Maya's confidence-building workshops, consulting with the school on safety protocols, and providing a steady, protective presence that made everyone feel more secure. After lunch, Maya walked across the street to the park where Jack was setting up equipment for an afternoon photography session. Sarah had suggested they document this period of their lives, understanding instinctively that these were the moments they'd want to remember when Maya was grown and their unconventional family story had become the foundation of who she'd become. How was school today? Jack asked, adjusting the camera settings while Baxter investigated the tripod with professional curiosity. Good. Tyler's making progress, and Emma's mom wants to nominate our support group for some kind of community service award. Maya settled on the bench where they'd first met, now marked with a small plaque reading, Maya's Place, where courage begins. And how are you feeling about the FBI offer? Jack paused in his equipment setup. 3 weeks earlier, he'd been formally invited to head a new task force, specializing in crimes against children. A position that would require occasional travel, but would be based primarily in the region. More importantly, it would allow him to continue the work that had given his life meaning while staying close to the family he'd found. I think it's time, Jack said. But only if you and your mother are okay with sharing me with other families who need help. Maya considered this seriously. Mom says healing people is what makes her happy at work. Maybe catching bad people is what makes you happy at work. Protecting good people is what makes me happy, Jack corrected. Whether that's catching criminals or teaching a brave little girl how to stand up for herself. Their conversation was interrupted by Sarah's arrival, her nursing shift having ended early for once. She approached them with the easy familiarity of someone who'd found her place in the world after years of uncertainty. "How are my favorite people?" she asked, settling beside Jack on the bench and accepting Baxter's enthusiastic greeting. "Jack's going to take the FBI job," Maya announced. Sarah smiled, her hand finding Jack's. "I know. We talked about it last night. I think it's wonderful." Over the past months, Sarah and Jack's relationship had evolved naturally from gratitude and shared concern for Maya into something deeper and more permanent. They'd moved slowly, carefully, understanding that their connection was built on more than circumstance. It was rooted in shared values, mutual respect, and the recognition that they made each other better people. "Sarah, there's something I've been wanting to ask you both," Jack said, his voice carrying a nervous edge that made Maya look at him with curiosity. "What is it?" Jack pulled a small velvet box from his jacket pocket, and Maya gasped with delight, while Sarah's eyes widened with surprise. "Maya, I know your father will always be your dad, and nothing will ever change that. But if your mother says yes, I'd like to be your family in every way that matters." He turned to Sarah, his expression tender and certain. "Sarah, I love you. I love Maya. I love the life we've built together. Will you marry me?" Sarah's tears came immediately, but they were tears of joy rather than sorrow. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, of course." Maya launched herself into a hug that encompassed both adults, while Baxter barked approvingly. "Does this mean Jack will officially be my stepdad?" "If that's what you want," Jack said, "it's what I want. But can I still call you Jack?" "It feels right. You can call me whatever makes you comfortable. What matters is that we're family." As the afternoon sun slanted through the oak trees, casting long shadows across the park where their story had begun, Jack set up the camera timer for a family portrait. The four of them, Jack, Sarah, Maya, and Baxter, arranged themselves on the bench where a frightened little girl had once asked a stranger for help. The photo would capture more than just their faces. It would preserve the moment, when broken people discovered that healing was possible when they chose to trust each other. Maya's transformation from victim to advocate, Jack's journey from isolated exile to family man and community protector, Sarah's evolution from overwhelmed single mother to confident partner in a shared mission, all of it reflected in their expressions of contentment and hope. "You know what the best part is?" Maya said as the camera clicked. "What's that?" Jack asked. "We found each other when we all needed finding. Dad used to say that families aren't just about blood. They're about people who choose to take care of each other, no matter what." Jack felt the truth of those words settle in his chest like a benediction. "Your father was a wise man. He would have liked you," Maya said with certainty. "He would have liked how you protected us." As they walked home together, Maya realized that the scared girl who'd once hidden behind books and avoided eye contact was completely gone. In her place was someone who understood that strength came not from never being afraid, but from choosing courage despite fear. Someone who knew that the most powerful thing you could do was help others find their own courage. The notebook Jack had given her for documenting. Tyler's harassment now contained a different kind of a record, stories of children she'd helped. Successful interventions, moments when speaking up had made the difference between safety and harm. She was no longer keeping track of her own victimization. She was documenting her growing ability to prevent others from becoming victims. That evening, as they prepared dinner in the kitchen of their new home, a house with enough space for Jack's office and Maya's tutoring sessions with other children, Maya hung the family photo on the refrigerator beside drawings from the kids in her support group. Jack, Maya said thoughtfully, do you think there are other kids out there who need someone like you to help them? I'm sure there are. Good, because I'm ready to help you find them. Jack looked at this remarkable child who had taught him that protecting the innocent wasn't just his job, it was his purpose, his calling, his reason for being. Maya had shown him that broken people could heal each other, that courage was contagious, and that family was something you built rather than something you were born into. Maya, he said, I think we're going to do some pretty amazing things together. I know we are, she said, with the confidence of someone who had learned to trust in happy endings, even when they came disguised as new beginnings.